Oh, very moody. Good evening, everybody. Come on, good evening. You can give it up. And welcome to those of you here tonight at this beautiful venue, the State Library of New South Wales, and those of you joining us on the live stream. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that tonight we're here on Gadigal country, and as storytellers, we acknowledge and thank the traditional custodians and elders of this land who have preserved story, song and culture for countless generations. And we pay respects to their elders past and present, and pay our respects to any First Nations people here with us tonight. My name is Loani Arman. I know a whole bunch of you because I've been kicking around this industry for a couple of decades, working mostly in development and production as a creative, but also sometimes as an executive, and I love TV. So I'm so excited to be here today to be exploring the showrunner model. We'll hear from this brilliant lineup of showrunners and writer creators about collaboration between writers and producers, and how that works in practice, what makes a showrunner, what that is, what makes that successful, and how writers can step into these creative leadership roles. Now, a little bit of housekeeping. Turn your phones off or get out, just don't do phones. But also, because if you go onto the Slido to add your questions, I understand, wow, Jeff. Wow, sorry. Unfortunately, everyone are going to be losing Jeff Melbourne from the panel. I did say I did want that. We didn't plan that. That just was very serendipitous. See, as a warning, Jeff nearly got booted off his own panel. Yes, if you could turn your phones off, because as Jeff just showed you, it's very loud and echoey in here. Now, if you want to add questions, we'll be getting to questions at the end of the panel. You can go to slido.com and put #showrunner in as the code, and we'll address a couple of questions at the end of the panel. And we'll conclude tonight at 7:30. Now, to introduce this brilliant panel, let's start with the person who forgot to turn their phone off, Jeff Melbourne.
I'll see your name. You're never going to remember that.
Not only has he got his phone off now, but he's also an Emmy Award-winning showrunner, writer, producer, and author who coaches writers, studios, and networks in the art of showrunning. He's got 40 years in TV, and they were very, very well spent. Northern Exposure, Remington Steele, Alias, Killing Eve, come on, what is that career? Founder and chair of the prestigious Writers Guild of America Showrunner Training Program, and author of the best-selling book running the show Television from the Inside. If you haven't read it, read it. It's full of great tips on how to run a show, but also really tangible, relatable, beautiful philosophy on having a career in this industry. Jeff has been in Australia facilitating a showrunner training program for 7 talented Australian screenwriters in the 3rd iteration of The Creators, a career acceleration program run by the Australian Writers Guild and Screen Australia. Down the end, we have Shane Brennan. Yes. Yes. Now, we all know Shane because he is Australia's most successful showrunner, creator and showrunner of NCIS LA. Since returning from the US in 2016, Shane has poured so much into providing training and opportunities for Australian writers seeking to be showrunners. So I know Shane's got a lot to offer to this conversation. The beautiful Sarah Lambert, who I've been dying to meet, so this is very fortuitous. Creator of some of Australia's most critically acclaimed dramas, most recently showrunner of The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart, Amazon's most successful global launch ever for an Australian show. Sarah was also, yes, the participant in the 2nd edition of The Creators? Yes. And my sis, Matilda Gupta, creator and lead writer of 4 Years Later, the first ever Australian Indian television series. Winner, yes, you can see that on SBS. Winner of the Bronze Award at New York Film and Television Awards, and acquired internationally by CBC and Lionsgate Play. And Anya Beiersdorf, creator of Fake, which broke streaming and subscription records for Paramount Plus, and won an Augie Award for Best Series last year. Other credits include Apple Cider Vinegar, which I loved, The 12, also love, Eden, and actor and Augie Award-winning series Fires. That's this impressive bunch that we get to talk to today about exploring the showrunner model. Please give it up. Now, panelists, we've got 45 minutes to cover quite a bit of territory. So, Jeff, I wanted to start with you because it is from the US that we have come to know the term showrunner. And broadly, I think most people get the sense that that's the person steering the ship on a television series. But what does that actually really mean? Because I do think that there is a lot of unknown. It's like a mythical creature. What is this showrunner? So I'd love to hear from you, what, under the US model of what a showrunner means, what is that exactly?
Showrunner has always been an informal term. There is no exact title that you'll see people get a credit for. It's the executive producer, often the creator of a show, who is responsible for overseeing all the creative aspects of producing a television show. This is showrunning at its apex, so that you are involved with casting, you're involved with the hiring the HODs, the directors, you supervise all the outlines and scripts, you do a fair amount of rewriting or overdrafting, depending on what country you're in, and you're also involved then in guiding the director through the production process, and then you also are heavily involved in post-production. Again, at its apex, and the stuff that Shane and I did with 22 episodes a year, you hire an editing staff so they get to know you, they're responsible to you, and even though you get extensive notes from the studio and network, essentially you have final cut because you're doing 22 episodes a year, they give you the notes, you incorporate them as faithfully as best you can, and then the picture's cut and you move on, and then you spot the picture with music and effects, and you sit in on the mix stage and approve the final dub. So it really is soup to nuts. But the job itself and the title, the name, didn't just come full blown from the head of Zeus. It was something that evolved because American television evolved from radio, where they were doing 39 episodes a year, and American television then did 39 episodes a year. It was too much for any one person to really guide the vision of really every episode. The only shows that would be exceptions would be more anthological shows like Twilight Zone, in which Rod Serling was able to exercise his sensibility in who he was choosing and the stories he was telling. But it was when TV cut down to 22 episodes a year that finally people began to realize, well, wait a minute, with 22 episodes to supervise, I actually can oversee the multitasking that goes on. And MTM Studios, not to get too much into the weeds, but with the Mary Tyler Moore Show and then with Hill Street Blues, kind of set the pace, and there were other shows too, where authority was given to one person to run the writing staff and to, instead of using freelance writers to do one-off episodes, using much more of an intense in-house staff to generate stories that would have more internal logic and consistency and through lines. And when that began to work, then the larger studios finally said, or began to see, we have to follow that model if we want the best writers. And the quality of the shows generally, I think, came up. And 1995 is the first time I can see, I found where the term showrunner was referred to in a big public way. It was a New York Times article on ER, and it was talking about John Wells, who is a great showrunner. And so the position and the term had been used inside the business for some time, since the 70s, but that was the first time that people outside of the business were saying, oh, I guess there's somebody that really is in charge of it. And again, context is really important. 22 episodes a year, very tight schedule, strict budgets. You really needed, in fact, when I give my keynote presentation about this, I use a slide of the Road Warrior and said, if you want to get out of here, you got to talk to me. And that's the way it is, I think, with showrunners. If you wanted to do something really well in that environment, you needed somebody who could maintain, who could handle all three phases of putting a show in the air: pre-production, production, and post. And that was the showrunner. So there was a certain amount of swagger that was attached to it. And I'll stop there, since this has been a long answer, but that was showrunning at its peak. It still exists, but with shorter orders and streamers and different people coming into it with different attitudes. The preeminence of the showrunner can't be taken for granted, let me just put it that way. And the job, even in the United States, has been changing in certain contexts. So it's important to realize that one size doesn't fit all, and that the term internationally can be quite polarizing. People can be very defensive about it. But the reason I'm here and the enjoyment I've gotten out of working with Australian writers is because I think it's very important for the best TV that writers be empowered to have something to say about how the shows are actually produced and edited. And people should work together to make that happen. It's not a question of a zero-sum game of power. You know, I want the power just for the sake of ego. It's no, we should be collaborating creatively to create the best show. And I think that the showrunner model promotes that kind of creative excellence at its best.
Yeah. I mean, context is a really good point to bring up, and staying with that and staying with you, Jeff, for a minute. You've worked in the UK, only in context because I want to drill down to what creative leadership looks like in Australia. But you've worked in the UK on Killing Eve. How did the model shift there in a different context?
Poorly. I was brought in to help a terrific writer named Suzanne Heathcote. That show was created by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and then Emerald Fennell came in. Yeah. And then the third year it was turned over to Suzanne, who was a British writer who was working in the States. And they said they wanted to do a hybrid of the American style and the British style. But whether they meant it or not, it just didn't happen. I talk about it in some detail in the book, but the fact is the system is just so different. Long story short, only in the United States are TV writers viewed as labor and management. Everywhere else they're viewed as just labor. And so to kind of get respect and authority as management is tough. And so I believe there was a sincere effort. They wanted to improve the efficiency and communication behind the scenes, and it just didn't happen. When we got there, I mean, and Shane could add to this. I mean, in the United States, we hire the directors, we hire the editors, and we sit in on all the edits. They hired 4 directors. They each hired their own editor. Suzanne and I never set foot in the editing room. That's just one example. And so I think that there's a lot of great stuff that comes out of the UK, but as far as the showrunner model is concerned, there's only a few people. Jed Mercurio's one, Stephen Knight's another, who've been able to get that kind of authority. And I used to wonder, why is it that the British, why don't we do more than just 8 episodes? Why can't we see all these great shows that Rumpole, The Bailey, and things like that? And I realized their system will just collapse. They can't do more than 8 episodes with the way that they run things. At least that was my impression. So my impression of the state of the art in England is that the showrunner is still not much further advanced than it is here or other countries. It's still largely, for many people, aspirational, and there'll always be the exception to the rule. But writers in England, writers throughout Europe and the Scandinavian countries, they're all looking for ways that they can have more authority and become more collaborative and more part of the production team. But in England, it's still, if you talk to British writers, I don't think you'll get a pretty report of how collaborative it is. They're prized for the writing, but then as Emma Frost said to me, they pat you on the head and say, go back to the sandbox and play and let the adults produce it. So it's, I see some people nodding their heads.
Shane, I want to move over to you. You've worked extensively in the US and in Australia. When you look at how things operate here, what does creative leadership actually look like in the Australian system?
It's kind of weird to hear you say that the model's now changed, because just as we start to get the showrunner model working here, it's all bloody going away again. It's what you've described with England is what it was like here. You know, before I went to the States, I had about 500 hours of credits. I'd watched about 150 of those. There's hundreds of hours I haven't watched because I didn't want to see what they did to it, how the director interpreted it, how the producer interpreted it. Because it would have destroyed me. So I always sent a script off, loving it, sent it away, and I'd take a peek. Okay, yeah, I think they've got the vision, you know. So that always irritated me, and continues to irritate writers today. I left in 2003, 5-year plan, stayed 14 years, came back, and the reason I left was because of this issue. I came back and nothing had changed. So that's why I decided to jump in and try and at least raise the profile of writers and hopefully end up with a, I guess, an Australian version of the showrunner model. And you'll never have it the same way, and the US is not having it anymore either, but you'll never have what they had in that golden period where the showrunner did have creative control, where the showrunner not only wrote the script, of course he watched it. He watched it probably 25 times because he was involved in every stage of it. And that just didn't happen here. So getting Jeff out, getting all of these very creative writers who actually want to be showrunners. Not everyone wants to be a showrunner. Not everyone can be. There's a real leadership issue when it comes to showrunning. You've got to push back. You've got to know when to push back. You've got to know when to collaborate. You've got to know when to just say, you know, screw this. I'm drawing a line here. And you need to understand all of the elements of what we do when we make a TV show to be able to do that. And that's something...
It's me. It's me. Who's going to moderate?
And on that note, thank you, Shane.
You know, just to jump in for 1 second, I was on about people not wanting necessarily to be a showrunner. It's a good point because I was on a panel with Jed Mercurio and Emma Frost and Matthew Graham in England talking to the British Writers Guild. And when we explained what went into it, a lot of people said, who'd want to do that job? But I think there was a lot of Stockholm syndrome there. I think if you've been abused, you don't think that you can actually walk out of that room and take charge, and so...
I mean, it's a good point to make, and I do want to come back to what qualities or what kind of person can elevate up to a showrunner. But Sarah, you've had an experience of being a showrunner in this country on The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart, and it's a series with such a distinct authorial voice. I'm curious to hear from you whether stepping into that role as a showrunner helped you preserve your vision for the project in ways that maybe weren't possible if you were creator-writer. Like, did stepping up into a showrunner give you better protection of your vision?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because the first real chance I had, I've had quite a few chances before that to be a showrunner, and it hadn't worked. You were more of a glorified script producer. So you were a script producer who had been allowed to have some say on cast, or you'd been allowed to kind of go through to the very end, and be in post. And each kind of project that you do, you kind of, because you're passionate about the story and you want to be the holder of that story and take it all the way through and kind of, have a voice all the way through it. So I'd had different experiences, and actually before that I'd done Lambs of God, and that was the first time I'd really done the job. And I mean, that taught me so much because I had a producer who really wanted to embrace the model and embrace that thing, and that was Jason Stevens with Lingo. And so I was involved in everything, picking the directors and the director, and Jeffrey Walker, who's a wonderful director, had worked in the United States and had worked with showrunners all this time. And so it was this great experience of, he really taught me also to become, to step into that role and, pick the production designers and pick all these people, and you were doing it collaboratively, and it was just a really joyous and wondrous experience. So each single project I'd done, I'd sort of gone, okay, this is the next step towards what do you want, what worked, what didn't work. So by the time Lost Flowers came about, I really, really wanted to take all those experiences and push what I knew worked and try it really with that show. And it was great because you get to, you pitch the show, you write the show, you're pitching the show, you're responsible for all of these different things. And it is a really collaborative process. I mean, we had one director for the entire show, Glendon Ivan, and so it becomes, that's very different. I think in a lot of these models we're talking about, you had multiple directors. And that's a very different thing. When you've got an authorial piece with one director, you really have to work together. And so you're a showrunner, yes, but you're kind of a showrunner with, Glendon and I did that together. But I picked the production designers. I was on before he was, and so you get to pick, your production designer. And really, I had pictures, and I'd been into the desert, and I'd been on locations, and I'd travelled with Holly Ringland, because she was the writer of the book, and so I had all these things that I wanted to bring to the screen. So I think that's the best version of it, is that you get to sort of hold this vision and then bring everybody along the way with that vision. But it is ultimately, you need producers who accept that. You also need directors who are excited to work with you. And then together, you know, you also need your editors to feel the same way. Everybody has to kind of come on board and go, we're making this together. And it is a different model here. It really, really is different. And it is also still new for our crews. You know, when you walk onto a set and you're the Australian showrunner, a lot of people have never seen that person. You know, they're not used to having a writer on set. So you have to kind of, you know, set up, you know, introduce yourself, make yourself not feel like a pest, because people go, oh, am I going to listen to the director or am I listening to the showrunner? And all of those different rules, you have to be the one that establishes it. And, you know, that takes a lot, but it is an exhausting, overwhelming job. But when you get to the end of it and you sit in that edit and you're with your team, your director, your producers, every single member, you really feel like you've been able to hold a vision from the beginning to the end. And there's something, you know, there's no other better feeling than that.
And to the point that you're making, it's very reliant on willing collaborators.
You have to have willing collaborators.
Anya, I'll come over to you with Fake, because reputationally, I would say, from what I know of you, is that you do have close working relationships with producers. Is that something that you're keenly invested in and you're focused on, in finding that right partnership so that you can deliver on your creative vision on this sort of pathway up to show running? And what happens when that maybe doesn't work well and it's slipping out of your control a little? Like, how do you keep that on track?
Yeah, well, for me, it's very much a partnership. I really think very long and hard about the person that I'm going to make this thing with, because, I mean, television, as we know, is such a collaborative art from the beginning to the end for me. So I'm maybe a little bit strange in that I kind of, at the very, very inception of an idea, if it's an original piece, I will come up with one line or one page and I'll have it in mind for the person that I'm sending it to. And I'll send it to them and I'm like, you know, what do you think about that? And they're like, yes, or snooze, or whatever, you know, and I kind of build it up from the ground. So I'm very much, from the very inception of the idea, collaborating with my first collaborator, who is, the producer. So Imogen Banks, we work very closely together, and yeah, kind of, I think it's that partnership that allows us to really both hold the story, and I enjoy that very much. And so on Fake, I was writer, creator, but for all intents and purposes, you know, I was in every meeting. I was, you know, helping choose the directors. I was helping with casting. I was, you know, helping write all the things for the art department. I was, you know, sort of there I was on set. I was in the production office. I was basically running around like a chicken without a head for 4 months. But it was such an amazing learning experience. And then, you know, in the edit as well, being on through that and being able to kind of talk with the directors, and also just to see the way that you can really reshape something in an edit as well, was really fascinating. So yeah, collaboration is really important to me, and I very much see it as a partnership for myself anyway, but other people work differently. When it slips out of your hands, never. You know, we're furious little ducks paddling very much underneath and looking like beautiful swans on the top, but I think, I mean, when it does all fall to pieces, as Fake did on numerous occasions, I think there's something about shooting a show called Fake that says that on the call sheet, that makes everybody feel slightly on edge. You know, when things do implode, you also have that other person that you can both kind of turn to each other and go, oh my God, what is this? And, you know, I 100% trust. We had a massive meltdown once when I was on a plane flying back home. And I landed and Imogen told me what happened, and I was like, oh my God. And then I said, what you should do is, and she said, I did. And I was like, that's what I was going to say. And it was just absolutely perfect, because we both knew, and I got to the end and I understood that, you know, the scenes don't matter, the dialogue doesn't matter. What matters is the story that you're telling. And if you're on the same page with the producer and you both understand that story in your gut and feel it together, then it becomes this symbiotic thing, and you can kind of help each other carry it through the whole thing. Personally, I would be frightened to do it on my own. So I'm very picky and I'm very lucky with the people that I work with as well. So yeah.
So just riffing off what you're saying about the credits that you have, and I know Showrunner isn't. Are you kidding me?
I keep getting alarms too.
I don't even know what the alarms are.
No.
But I want to go to you, Tills, and to speak to 4 years later. And it's such a personal ode to your love of romance, your beloved Indian heritage. But your titles on that were EP, writer and creator. So I'm curious to hear about how you protected your vision, the authenticity of that show, especially outside of development. Typically as a head writer and creator in this country, development is your domain, but I know that you worked across production and all the way through to post. How did you earn the privilege or the right to access those spaces?
Firstly, it was about the people I was working with. There was definitely a trusted relationship there where I knew we would put the show first. So often we're talking about ego. And it was just never about me, it was never about them, it was about the show. But I was a bit sneaky with it as well, because I was lucky enough that I was in development on a US show with a co-showrunner there who was a US veteran. So I would reality check myself with her. And I'd be like, I'm doing this and this, and she's like, you are show running. And about just before production, she was like, why does your email signature still say creator, writer, EP? She's like, that's so wordy. Just write creator, showrunner. And I did it, and no one told me off. So I was like, I'm the creator, showrunner now. Yes. But I did the job always. Yeah. Like, it was always the job. It was such a unique project. Most of my projects are very personal to me. So the stories are within me, and I live and breathe them every day. So anyone who wants to make a show that's going to succeed and resonating wants to tap into that, unless ego gets in the way. So it was, I think, firstly, it was about me saying, I can do this because I'm doing it every day and it's good for the show. And then often it was a negotiation. So from the get-go, not everyone gets an EP contract on their show. So day one, that was very important. So we worked hard to get that, and we got that. And that was kind of the thing that I could lean on if I ever needed to. Yeah. And then from there, it was about the collaborations. So there was already an understanding with the production company and producers, Easy Tiger, Ian Colley and I. Ian had taken me to India to plot a thriller before I'd even written a thriller for something that I was going to create. So he'd shown a real confidence in my work, and we'd been there and kind of lived that experience together. So I had a direct line there where I would pick up the phone anytime I needed to talk about agency and authenticity and all of those things that were important. I was involved in hiring the directors. So before we even met as a team, I met with Fad, I met with Mohini, had a conversation. Same with HODs. We were lucky enough that we shot in India first. So I kind of feel like I had to pretend to be a showrunner but be a showrunner twice, because in India, director is God. But it was really interesting because I was kind of like, hey, but then also trying to speak Hindi, but people would talk back in English, and I'm like, no, fold me in, I can speak Hindi. But they would talk to the director, but I'd already formed a relationship with both Mo and Fad. So when something came up that involved story, which was everything, they would fold me into the conversation, and then all of a sudden I was already folded in for the next ones. And in Australia, I felt really fortunate because our first assistant director on day one of shoot on set stood up and did like a welcome everybody, blah, 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 but also we're here to make this show, and spoke a little bit to my experience getting the show to that point, because we'd had a really long development and quite a windy but fun road. So we did. And so all these people, all these crew members that may not have worked with a showrunner / writer, creator, EP before, saw me as that person. And so that just opened up all the doors. And I feel really lucky because I don't think many people on their first show get an experience like that where they can honestly feel proud. I mean, I was exhausted. It was really, really, really tiring, but I loved the show, so it was worth it.
And willing collaborators, but interesting, Anya and Tills here, both speaking to experiences where you're filling the role of a showrunner, but that's not officially your credit.
I will say I've taken an EP credit on every single thing I've done after that, which was a lesson.
Now I want to return to what kind of writer can step up into these leadership roles. And I'll go to you, Jeff, because you've got decades of training writers to be showrunners. What makes a great showrunner? What are the attributes that you can identify in a writer? Because it's not, to your point, Shane, it's not for everyone.
No, it's true. I mean, and as I point out in the book, did I mention I wrote a book? The qualities that make a good writer are not at all necessarily the qualities that make a good leader. In fact, in some ways, writers are spectacularly ill-equipped to be leaders because we spend all day by ourselves and creating these worlds and having control over that. But I think, my colleagues here touched on a number of things that are important. Passion for the work is really important. And then the desire to communicate, because we all have lessons to learn about how to communicate. So certain things can be taught about leadership, but one thing that can't be taught is your passion and your sensibility. And so that needs to be important. And you need to also not hide your light under a bushel. You need to assume, you need to be comfortable with the idea that I'm going to be in charge of this and have the self-belief to say, I don't have to say I'm the best writer in Sydney or even in the room, but it's my show, and as long as it's going to be my show, it's got to be done the way that appeals to my sensibility, because if I surrender that, anybody could be sitting here. So you need to have that kind of sense that I've got this job, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. I think it's hard to pick out necessarily qualities that are going to make somebody into a great showrunner necessarily. We all come in different sizes and shapes, and I know, pick one example, Jason Katims, who did Friday Night Lights, and terrific writer, playwright by background, and he looks like a college professor who kind of just mumbles and looks down and he's not what you'd consider a show person at all, and he's very effective and he's beloved, and he's the showrunner. Bill Lawrence, who created Scrubs and Ted Lasso,
Yeah.
Bill Lawrence is a riot. I mean, he is very confident, and at least in his affect, and is very entertaining and very direct, and runs things in different ways. And so I think it's the desire to learn. It's the willingness to learn from your mistakes. It's understanding that decision is the essence of command, and it's better to make a bad decision than no decision.
Yes.
And you just have to keep moving forward. It's kind of like a shark, if you stop, you die. And so you've got to, you just got to keep going. And it's important to have a lifeline outside of the business, because things do go crazy, and you need to be able to call somebody and have a lifeline. I also think another thing that's important is self-knowledge. I'm a big believer in therapy. I think if you haven't had therapy before you've gotten into the job, you may be running into some booby traps.
Yeah. So there's a lot of nodding heads in the therapy.
And so that's all part of it, because I think a good leader recognizes their own strengths and limitations, and also recognizes that other people have strengths and limitations. And so kind of a broad, unsatisfying answer. But I think that, like I said, we come in all shapes and sizes, but passion, desire to learn, willingness to learn from mistakes, resilience, sense of humor, sense of self-knowledge, those are all some of the qualities that go into it.
Yeah, I mean, we've got examples here of writers who've stepped into those roles and done that on productions. I'm curious about pathways, and I'll go to you, Shane. With programs like The Creators, which you've invested heavily in with Screen Oz, what is the vision for this program, and what do you see as the ideal outcomes for it?
Yeah, the ideal outcome is better television, better programming.
Yeah.
It's always been that. The reality is, what you see on screen isn't necessarily what the writer wanted. And the writer's vision is often very pure. When you write something, you usually have explored every avenue. And so when you get a network executive or someone on the set, a producer, a director, who says, what if we did this? Oh, that's a great idea. No. I tried that idea, it didn't work. And so you have tried every version of this to get to that pure vision of what the show is. And that's what you're trying to make. Along the way, with the Australian, well, it's not a version of Showrunner, the Australian history of making television, the writer is cut off very early. Everyone interprets the material, and they make something that you sometimes just don't recognise. And the frustrating thing about that is that it falls so far short of what it could have been. And the audience look at it and go, it's okay. But your version, was fucking brilliant, if they just delivered it the way you wanted it. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give writers the opportunity in the industry to be able to say, no, this is what I want to do. Yes, I'm going to need lots of help. Help me do it. This is the vision. This is what you bought. Why are you going to start listening to this guy over here who's only been on the show for a week when I've been working on this for 3 years? Don't I have a bigger stake and a better understanding of what we are trying to make here? That's what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to give writers that purchase with producers and particularly broadcasters, but some producers in this country, production companies, have a sort of a view of writers which is very much 1980s. They're, thanks very much, got the script, see you at the wrap party. And of course, often you don't get invited to the wrap party. Bloody writer. So that's
let's stay on barriers. Like, what are the barriers to forming some sense of what an Australian showrunner is? You're talking about producers.
They tend to be barriers that you put in front of yourself.
Yes,
to be
sure.
honest.
Yeah.
And that is, I may never work in this industry again if I say. So you need to have that self-worth. It's what you said before, Jeff, about, and it's, to me, you probably see that as part of a whole list of things. To me, that's at the top of the list. Can I do this? I want to do this. I've got to believe that I can do it. A very quick story. When I took over NCIS, the previous showrunner created, Don Belisario, got fired. And I was called into the studio and met the head of the studio and the head of the network. And I'd been working on the show as a consulting producer for season 4. And Don got fired at the end of season 4. I took over at the beginning of season 5. I went to see the studio and the network on the day they hired me. And I said, thanks for this opportunity. And what do you want me to do with the show next season? And they looked at me and said, we don't know. It's your show. You're the showrunner. Yeah. You just do it.
And not a good thing to ask an executive.
Yeah, it was like, oh crap. I've got to actually, they're going to give it to me. I've got to do this. I've got to be able to step up. So that's the most important thing. I had to choose right then within myself and say, you know what, I'm going to grab this. I'm going to grab this tiger by the tail and I'm going to hang on and I'm going to learn how to do it. Because at that point, I'd had virtually no production experience. Writers didn't go on sets. Writers just weren't involved in any of the casting or anything. And there was an expectation with the US system that because I was such an experienced writer that I'd had lots of production experience. None. Couldn't find my way to the craft services tab. So that's the biggest thing. It's about self-belief. And that's what I'm trying to, I guess, instill in all of these wonderful people here. And that's what Jeff's been doing as well, is just giving them you can do it.
Does that check, tell Sarah, Anya?
I think it's really important to, if you turn up to set and there's no chair for you at the split, just get one. And then go and find the sound guy or woman and just say, hi, I'm the creator, I'm the showrunner, I'm going to need a headphone if you see me, because otherwise you're sitting there and you've got no idea. So make a seat for yourself because we need to have a seat.
And it's very important. I think the common denominator is you need a champion. In a system that doesn't have the tradition, somebody has to escort you to the table in most cases. And if you have a really good champion who's a director or a producer or both in a team, it's great. And that's what I've seen in Europe as well, that the people that have broken through, whether in Germany or Switzerland or Sweden, Denmark, it's because it's been collaborative.
And the thing about that is, you said before about making decisions. That's the biggest trick that you have to learn. One of the very first lessons you learn when you're starting to showrun, literally showrun, is make a decision. It could be on set, and how are we going to shoot this episode or this scene, and are we going to do this or that, and the DOP's talking to the director and the actors are getting involved. If you're standing there, you have to take control of that, and you've got to say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go this way, and everyone's like, great, we're going that way. And even if you don't know what you're doing, you've got to tell them, we're going that way. And then while they're going that way, you go, oh crap, you make a few phone calls and say, okay, now we're going that way. And you get it back on. But if you sit there and you don't make a decision, they're all trying to help you. They're all trying to, well, let's do this.
Yeah, an expression I use
goes up
Yeah,
in
that's
smoke.
a bad idea.
in the writer's room is if you don't know where you're going, every road will take you there. And you want to avoid that. And also, I'd been a journalist for 7 years before I started working with television, and there was a lobbyist for a cause that I don't even remember what it was, but it was very controversial. This guy was brilliant. And I went up to him afterwards and said, how can you talk with such conviction about such a touchy thing? He said the trick to being a good lobbyist is to act with 100% conviction about something you may think is only 51% right. And that's what you're talking about, is that once you've decided to go this way, we're going that way.
Yeah, and they'll follow you until they don't and you go the other way.
I think also a part of that is the negotiation. So I knew for 4 years later, the directors were so integral to this vision. So we had a chat. Fadia had a relationship with Mohini. It was her first long-form drama. So I was like, great, we can probably be malleable here. And so we had a chat and I said, this is my expectation. And these are the things I would like to do. And these are the things that I'd like space for. What about you? And for instance, one of the things was don't talk directly to the actors if that's okay. Like if you're talking to the actors, we want to know what's being said. We want to know what that is for the drama, for the relationship. And so done, easy done. All those conversations, we folded each other in. But I may not have known that. So in my trying to find self-worth, I might have bulldozed. But luckily I'd had that conversation. So we were able to work together.
That's so important. Expectations are so important. This is what I'm bringing to the table. What's your view of what I'm doing? And here's my view of what you're doing. There's a book that we recommend, that we hand out in the Showrunner training program that I recommended to the creators as well, called Difficult Conversations. And it is a wonderful guide to how to think about these things and how to prepare and how to, I mean, communication is so key. Somebody as advanced as Bill Lawrence was talking about, somebody who worked on one of his shows wanted to do a show with Bill, and Bill reluctantly agreed, but he said, I forgot to have the conversation, meaning how's this going to work? And what happened is the show was going on its feet. He found out this subordinate wanted to be treated as the head of the show. And Bill said, that was really on me because I'd never really sat down and said, this is the way it's going to work. And the show didn't go forward, and he was happy about that. But it doesn't matter how experienced you are, communication, honest communication, transparency, asking the question is always the way to go.
Yeah, and definitely doing it all up front. It is that
Yes.
thing of, you have to sort of lay that groundwork at the very beginning of how do we work together. You know, in Australia, that relationship with your producer or that production company, you have to sit down and go, oh, I'm selling you this, you know, we're doing this together, we're going to a network together. How is this going to work? From here on in, what are the kind of ground rules of how we're going to do this and make this show? And having everybody have the one vision, like that they fall in love with your vision of this show, this is the way we're going to do it, and we're going to do it together. And then it's like getting each person on side, and then you kind of have a much smoother path. But it is that those initial conversations are everything. And if you don't get those right, everything just goes off on the wrong foot.
Yeah, you used a very important word, trust. If you don't trust the people that you're working with, it can be a mess.
Yeah.
I want to, we're going to go to questions in a second, but I do want to put it to the group that if we're looking at designing a truly Australian way of running a show, what would make that instantly recognisable as a model of making television? Is there such a thing? Or is it a little more bespoke as it seems to be, project to project to project? I'll go to you, Shane.
Thanks.
Good question.
It's interesting. I think it's still, the jury's out. We're still trying to figure that out. And we can use the American showrunner model as the gold standard. And it wouldn't be great if we could do that, but that would then mean that we've got lots of broadcasters paying us lots of money to put a lot of writers in a room together to make lots of shows.
Yeah.
And that ain't happening here. and it's stopped happening over there.
Well, not that, I don't, it's still happening. It's not
On a
either
smaller
or
scale.
anymore. Streamers have dominated, and they haven't been exemplars of good show running habits, because to the degree that volume of shows, pace of production, and fiscal discipline are important, you need a showrunner. Conversely, with these streamers, if they can pay for reshoots, and they, you know, it used to be you have to be on the air September 22nd with your first show, and then you just got to start running. Well, that's one thing.
Yeah.
If they say, well, you know, we've just looked at your pilot, well, we're going to reshoot half of it. You know, we said it was going to be on in January, we can push it to June.
Push it.
You know, and they don't even have to make it at all.
Yeah.
In that kind of loose environment, I don't think that promotes good creativity, but that's a different situation. And so to the degree that, and we see that the streamers are paying for their largesse in many cases, and they've discovered this thing called profitability, which is suddenly becoming a little bit more important to them as opposed to just subscriber growth. But anyway, I just wanted to correct that. The important thing is you can't assume anymore that when we talk about a showrunner that we're talking about the job that you and I have.
And the difference is the free-to-airs in the States still do tend to follow that older showrunner model, and the streamers have come in, as Jeff said, with this new model, which is kind of a bit like the way writers are treated in Australia and have been for decades. What the model looks like, I think, is a bit of a hybrid, where if we end up with a writer who's created a show, and I think it's always going to be that way, to a certain extent, Jeff and I did our business in a world where there was a certain amount of gun for hire. You need a good showrunner to take over this show. I know Jeff jumped into save shows. I did the same on a couple of different things. Here, the model, I think, is more, this is my vision. I created this show. I want to run it. Give me the people to help me do that and put that vision on screen. And we'll do it as a collaboration, but it's still my vision. It's what you bought. So why dilute it? Why change it? That's the model I think we're looking for, where writers, to a certain extent, get more respect. More money would be good too. But the respect thing is really important, because if they've got that respect, then people will say, no, that's what we want to make. They're on top of it. And so the moment they think you've got a control of it, of the idea, of the vision, they're more likely to let you do it. And if you surround yourself with very experienced people, they're going to be more relaxed about it.
And that comes back to that self-belief, right? And backing your own vision. I'm going to go to an audience question, and it's a good one. There's resistance to the idea of show running. Dare I say gatekeeping from directors and producers? How should writers make the case for that, for what we all know will be better TV?
Bingo. Mutual approval. So I think one thing that that works really well when I work is that unless Imogen and I are both happy, nothing's happy. Do you know what I mean? So we have to keep talking and keep exploring until we get to the point where we are understanding what we're going to do and we're both happy. So sometimes you give, sometimes you pull, and I think that's really nice. That's that partnership.
So you're talking about within an existing system, and I think part of that question is how do we make the case, we being Australian writers, that we should be given more of a place at the table. And you know, one of the questions I have is to the producers out there would be, what are you afraid of? Where's the harm in giving the writer at least a seat at the table? And I think for most people, that path is going to be incremental. It's not you're going to be given a scepter and suddenly you're in charge of the show the way that we were in charge of a show, but it's saying, come on, this is common sense. Let's collaborate. It's not a zero-sum game. Emma Frost says that no turkey ever voted for Christmas, and that's the way a lot of people look at it, is that, I give up my power and now I'm nothing and you're everything. And that's how I think showrunner as a term can drive a wedge, when really what's important is I want to be a producer on this show. A producer in a literal sense. I want to help produce the show, and I want to help produce your show, and we can do it for less money and get more money on the screen, bigger bang for the buck, more efficient, and we'll just make better TV that way.
Yeah. Because that's the opportunity of finding a model of show running is better TV, to your point, Shane. But do you think that is a pathway to better TV that's specifically ours but internationally recognised? Does it feel crucial that we need to find a way through to establishing what this very specific Australian model of show running is?
It's absolutely critical. And, you know, one of the most disappointing things about Australian television is it doesn't make money. When a lot of British TV and a hell of a lot of American TV, and obviously there are shows that fall over all the time over there, but there's money to be made. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep making it. But here, it's like, oh, if we get a domestic sale, great. It's like, well, think big. Let's make something that the world wants to make, to watch. And that means, you know, paying a bit more to develop the show, paying a bit more for extra drafts of the script, paying a bit more for production, you know. Step up to it. We've never been able to do that. There's been this very just looking at the shoes kind of thing, one foot in front of the other instead of looking up and looking out and going, you know what, we're good enough to make something. Look at all of the directors of photography, the actors. Look at, they're all working everywhere in the world. We have this great pool of people who should be making stuff here and selling it to the world. And if we did that and made money for the producers and the broadcasters and the streamers, you know what? They come back and ask you to do another
They
one.
wouldn't question it.
And I think success breeds success. If you have a notable success here, people can say, well, what made that successful?
Yeah.
You say, well, that's because this woman had a vision and she followed it through, and they gave her the authority to follow it through. Maybe we should do that. You know, so then you get your Jed McCurios and your Phoebe Waller-Bridges, and you say, okay, what's the common denominator there? Maybe we should do that. You know.
Yeah.
A good writer.
Yeah.
I'm glad this question's been asked because it was on my list. But it's for Sarah. What needs or gaps are you responding to by starting your own production company? Lantern Pictures.
Yeah, I'd like to
Lantern
know
Pictures.
that too. Yeah.
I think in the end for me it was that I still am, you know, I still work for other companies and we do co-produce and things like that. But I guess I've been a producer, you know, completely a producer. My kind of history is a little bit different. I've been a writer, I was an actor, I've been a director, and in the States I directed a 65-part series and directed 35. I produced a series in the United States for another company. So I've produced, I've actually raised money and finance and all those sorts of things. So I sort of know that side of the business. I've been a writer for, you know, 30 odd years now. And so for me, it was that thing of, there isn't a job I haven't done on a set. You know, I was an editor for years, you know, just to make money, because you have to make money in so many different ways. So you become sort of a jack of all trades. And so it's been, for me, this thing of when you have a vision for a show, it's like, I want to be able to carry it all the way through, and I want to be part of all of those decisions. I want to know what the budget is of the show. You know, like in Australia, you can be a script producer and never have seen a budget. You know, you can have produced a show and actually not know what the budget of your show is. So you can't problem solve things as a writer. And as a writer, you can actually fix and change things before there is a problem, right? Because, you know, like if you kind of get to the end of production and you don't have any money for music, and this show is a teen show and it's got really needs a kind of dynamic budget, you're screwed, you know what I mean? And then you're trying to kind of find these things and piece it together too late in the picture. But if you'd known up front, you could actually do something.
Yeah.
And I think writers are really intelligent, and I think we're really undervalued in a sense. So I want my writers to feel ownership. I want writers to kind of know the issues. I want them to understand how much things really cost. I want them to be across every aspect of production, so that when we do a show together, you know, when we make a show, that you can, you know, you're in the writer's room and you're imagining everything that could be possible. But then it's like, how can we actually make this show with this budget in this kind of market and sell it and do all of those things? And so for me, it was really about, you know, creating the company was really going, I've done all these jobs. I know what this is. I've been around for long enough that now it is, I want to kind of create the shows the way I want to make them. And so that was very much sort of the drive, but also a love of writers. I really wanted writers and creators to feel that there was a home where I could, you know, help create a bit more of a showrunner model and hold people's hands. Because I think the other thing is that you can be a creator and a writer and you can have this amazing idea, but if you have none of those skills and you've never been allowed to be on set, you've never been in an edit room, you've never cut anything, you've never had any of those experiences, you're going to be set up for failure if you get to run your show and then everybody's turning to you for all of these sort of answers. And if somebody's not really holding your hand and helping you to be the best possible person, you are going to fall over and it's going to crash and everyone's going to go, oh, this doesn't work, and it will fail. And I hate that. And I don't want that for anybody. You know, I really think there's so much you want to hold a writer and you want to hold the intention, you want to hold this beautiful story and bring it to the screen with everything that you can. And so for me, creating the company was doing that. And I already had relationships with broadcasters. You know, I pitched to Amazon. I know all the people at all the different entities, and I keep I think that's really important, that writers, the other thing that was weird to me for a long time is that you had an idea, but the producer was selling it and you weren't going into the room to pitch it. And I was like, that's crazy. This is your passion. This is your story and you want to sell it. So that it was about going, okay, we're going to put you in the driver's seat. I'm going to be in the driver's seat. We're going to be pitching these stories directly to these people. I am responsible to them. I'm responsible for raising that money, the finance, making it all happen and going from there. So it was really, for me, starting the company was sort of filling that gap for myself so that I could really kind of know what it is to kind of hold a show from beginning to end. And it is not easy, you know, like it's really hard for producers. And I think that that's also really important for writers to be aware of how hard it is in this country for producers. They don't get paid during development. Only writers are getting paid. You know, it's really, really tough being an independent producer. So it's wonderful to be doing, and it's great, and it's working, and we've got something coming up next year, and I'm really excited about that. We get to make our first show with Lantern, and that's going to be brilliant.
Oh, congrats.
But it is, you know, I think it's a way of moving forward and just doing things differently and seeing how we can do it. And it's also, the great thing has been is that other production companies and producers I've worked with have been so incredibly supportive. You know, they are, you know, completely behind us and, you know, co-producing with us on certain things. And so I think there is we want to make great TV in this country, and we want to support our writers in the best way possible, and we just have to find new ways to do it.
And that's very known about your production company, that is very collaborative. The intention of it is to be collaborative, so a nice invitation to good collaborative partners. Sorry,
I was just going to say that listening to you reminded me that when I started the Showrunner training program 21 years ago, the ethos was there are a lot of reasons that shows fail, but ignorance shouldn't be one of them. And that was the motive behind the program. And that sounds exactly like what you're saying, is to give people the knowledge.
Which is why I came in, I did your program, is that I really wanted to learn more, is that every single show I've done, you know, you've succeeded in so many ways and then you fail in so many other ways and you think, I will never do that again. And I have a manifesto and it's been growing for like 20 years of like, I will never do that again and I will never do that again. And you just want to hold all that knowledge that you have of all the things that didn't work and be able to hand it on to the next group of people that come through and help them, so that, you know, we can make sure
this is the type of person we're looking for in the program.
Well, I was going to say, it's also a really great example of the benefits of training programs, right? Because Sarah, you've been through the creators, you've done training as a showrunner, as well as your experience working in production, but I can feel the echoes of all the training that you've done as a showrunner embodied in your production company. So, you know, kudos to all your efforts to seek out that education, but also those offering it. For Jeff, we had a question for Tills, but I don't know who to ask. I didn't. Thank you. That's right. What was it like, Tills, showrunning 4 years later that was split between India and Australia?
It was a dream. Look, I don't know if you've read the article, Indian films have topped the Aussie box office now 3 years in a row. We're very passionate watchers. So in terms of making global television, there is a huge market there, because not just the local Indian, local Australian, but the diaspora around the world. If it's a romance, a thriller, you've got all those people that like the genres. So for me, I really felt amazing personally, because it was working between my two cultures, but also on a bigger scale. I was like, I really, really hope, not just for me, but for many people in this room who I know are wanting to do the same thing, I hope this is the first of many, because I think it is one way to help sustain our industry here. And so it was a complete dream come true. It had its challenges, you know, we code switch every day, but code switching between being a writer, creator, EP, showrunner, and also between being an Indian and an Australian was quite wild, but that's what the show's about. So I kind of just tried to channel it all in, and yeah, it was a dream, and I hope there's many more to come.
And it's also reflected on screen. You can feel that. It's such a gorgeous series. I think this will be our last question because we've got 3 minutes. But for Jeff, what impact do you think the Trump administration has had on the TV? Wow, that's a 3-minute answer.
Right.
Is that what you
The Trump
back to me?
administration has had on the TV industry in the US?
Well, like a politician, I'm not going to answer that question. But I will answer that question. But first, I just wanted to emphasize what you said. The community is so important. And we work so independently as writers for the most part that the chance to be together and recognize that we have common issues and common goals is really important. My first boss in the business used to say, we're all on this leaky boat together. And that's sometimes the way it feels. But I know that when we started the Showrunner training program, a number of people said, this is the first time I've met writers other than on the picket line. It was just so great. Or people outside of their pajamas, on the picket line. And it was a joke, but there was a lot of meaning to it, that writers we need to reinforce one another, and not just here, but internationally, because there's a lot of brothers and sisters out there who are going through the same thing, and I think we can all help each other. So, the Trump administration, I don't think it actually has had any solid impact on the industry itself, other than to make a lot of writers angry and somewhat suicidal, just because of the politics. But I think our business is so broken in so many ways right now by things that have nothing to do with the Trump administration, that people are scrambling to create as best they can under the conditions we have. And it's maybe the one area where Trump has really not had any direct influence, I think, on what's going on. I mean, his talk about tariffs on movies and things like that, and that's what he's saying today. Who knows what he says tomorrow?
He is giving us a lot of material.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's true. But
South Park.
But no, I think that
South Park?
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I don't see any signs yet of any serious impact, and I think any impact that they would have on the business would be negative. But I can't see them doing anything to help us. His distaste for California and for punishing Democrats is profound, and we've had a lot of production leave California. We've had a terribly backward tax incentives program until recently, and Shane and I were talking about it, is that they've just upped the amount of money for LA, and is that going to have an impact? It may be too late, in the sense that like 140,000 jobs have left the industry in the last couple of years, and it's pretty spooky. But while we're on that subject, I wouldn't want to end this on a negative note. I think that we were all talking about this in the green room beforehand, that good writing will always be necessary. Storytellers will always be necessary. Good writers will find a way to adapt and prevail over these conditions. And anybody who got into this business thinking it was a good bet financially, that was one of the distortions of peak TV, is that people actually thought it made sense. It never made sense. You've got to be somewhat poisoned by emotion and fueled by all sorts of other desires to say we're all walking wounded, or we wouldn't be writers in the first place. And so, just hold on to that and support one another, and just believe in what the overall goal, which is to translate the experience of being human, and that hopefully, even with the Trump administration, will not go away. So,
beautiful sentiment, and in the spirit of not leaving on a negative, and looking at the opportunities ahead, to continuing this conversation. Like, what's the aspiration for seeing something that is uniquely Australian in the showrunner model, even if it is tailored to production? Like, what is the hope for each of you down the line, so we can leave on a good, positive note?
Oh God, so much. Being really specific, writers who are creating shows fighting for that EP deal, because I think there's a lot you can nut out right at the top to help the journey. And for us to info share more as well, because we kind of sit here and talk about our experiences, and then we have other more candid conversations, and I think if we just keep doing all of that together, we'll find a way through together.
Yeah, so less gatekeeping. Less
sharing the experience.
Great.
Yeah.
Sarah?
I totally agree. I think it is the sharing of information and helping each other out. I think it is. I think we all informally talk to one another about the state of the industry and how things work. And I think the more that if we're really honest about the experiences that we have, so that other people don't have to go through the same thing. So, and also asking for it. You can ask to be an EP, and you can also ask, and really lay out what it is you want for the vision of your show. And good producers will listen, and if they want to make their show with you, you will make it together. And it's finding the right person, it's finding that right company and finding that right relationship. And they are out there, and there are people. I mean, the ultimate goal is we all want to make amazing stories. We really want to tell stories because we're driven to make great TV. And so I think, I think trusting that there are really good people out there and you can find them and ask for what you want.
Jeff, having worked with...
One specific on that is, I was talking to Peter Matesi about that because we were talking about how can you get any kind of certifiable authority, and he said, well, I've got it in my contract, and he actually sent me a copy of his last contract, which I shared with the creators, and I can make available, and other people said, oh yeah, this is kind of what I see too. So there actually is, again, in terms of sharing information, there actually is language that people can use to get contractually at least some of these authorities. I mean, some of these responsibilities. I can't comment specifically on the Australian industry, but I can tell you that over these last 3 years, the Australian writers that I've met and working with Shane and with the Australian Writers Guild has been extremely inspiring. And I find that the pound for pound Australian writers are more resourceful, show more initiative, are more fun to drink with than, than a lot of their American counterparts. So I'm very bullish on the quality of human beings that are writing in Australia, and I just hope that you can get some wind under your wings and find a way to make more and better.
I think that we are producing some really exciting television in Australia, so much amazing stuff, and I think that producers are seeing the benefits of having an authored creative voice. And I loved what someone over here said before, asking producers, what are you afraid of? Let's see what happens, let's put it on the table together, move forward, and you'll wonder what you ever did without us, basically.
And to coin, to repeat a phrase that you coined, bring your own chair.
Bring your own chair! Or steal someone else's.
Yeah, or steal someone.
Feel free.
That works.
And to Shane, finish us off.
I guess my big hope is that, and I think it's happening, we're raising the profile of writers. And not just within the industry, but within the general community. And that's important because when someone looks at a TV show and they love an actor and they love the way this series has worked and it's the best thing they've watched and they want to talk about it to everyone, that somewhere in there they say, a writer wrote that. Someone wrote that. It came from someone. And if we can raise our profile as writers, then everything should follow. The producers, the broadcasters will treat you with more respect. And one of the things that it really drove me out of the country in 2003 was the total lack of respect I had as a writer. And yet everyone wanted to hire me to write things, but no one wanted to believe I could produce anything, or that my vision was going to be what was going to be on screen because they were going to hand it to someone else. So that respect that every writer deserves when they poured their heart and soul and the emotion of what they've lived through often into a series is really important to deliver something to the community that they can love, they can enjoy, and that they understand that, there are people out there who are writers, and I've got great respect for them because it isn't just the actors, it isn't just the directors, it's the writers too. My saying is, and it goes back a long way now, producers get the money, directors get the credit, and writers get the blame.
Oh, so true.
And I'd like everyone to get the credit, everyone to get the money, and probably the studios to get the blame.
Nicely put.
Well, on that note, and we have run a little over, I apologise. My hope is that I never do another panel and scold someone for having their alarm on. Yes.
Can I just be really, really rude? Because I'm probably the oldest member of the guild here.
Oh, yeah.
I've been sweating I've been around, I've been sweating for years under all these sorts of things that, when they throw your script up the air and catch it and shoot it, and then you're supposed to, acknowledge that. We're all talking amongst ourselves about what we should do, and we should talk to each other and make ourselves feel better. Why don't we as a guild have a strategy, get together some kind of document which goes out there and says, listen, we know heaps of ways to make things good cheaper. I can tell you 5 or 6, all of us can do is 5 or
That's great.
Are you talking about a framework for what a showrunner model could be? Is that what you're...
PR campaign for writers.
Yeah.
Everybody's, it's coming back to the writers.
Yeah.
It's coming back to the writers. You're all saying writers need to be honoured, the script needs to be honoured, and why don't we all talk to each other about how we get more power?
They need to be mentioned in press releases.
To assure you on this, I do believe that there is a framework in progress, and so that is actually being actioned. But thank you so much for raising the point. It's a valuable point, and it's one that is actually being addressed by your jury. So thank you for coming and
I should
for
point
the
out
question.
there's one other very important factor why American writers have the status they do, and it's the guild. It's the union, and a union is rated by its ability to stop production. That's what the point of a strike. And the Writers Guild was built on the backs of some very costly strikes, most of which were successful, but not all were. And I just observing things like, especially in England, which has been so anti-union for a while, wonderful people on their guild, they don't have the ability to stop production. They can't call a strike and bring the industry to their knees. So it's just a question of context again. I'm not encouraging that you guys strike, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that you have to work within the framework that you have and set realistic goals and celebrate small victories. You know?
Yeah.
So.
Well, on that note, don't strike, but please join me in thanking this incredible panel. Yeah. And thank you to all for coming and those on the live stream for participating in a conversation like this. I really do hope it's one of many to come so that we continue to tell stories that are very uniquely ours. Thank you so much and good night.